There is a pot in the kitchen of a moonlit temple. It has not been washed in a lifetime. Yet the miso it holds tastes of a celebration no one alive remembers. The pot sits on a cold hearth, where dust motes dance in the candlelight. Its clay is the color of a forest floor after rain. The seasoning has built up in rings like the inside of a tree, each one a year, a season, a single afternoon. There is a map of tiny scratches near the rim where a wooden ladle has stirred for decades. The bottom is darker, almost black, where the slow heat of 1,000 fires coaxed sweetness from simple things. The pot has no maker's mark. It was never signed. It was used. This pot sat in silence for years. It knew something the children did not. The first question: would anyone ever light the fire again? If you press your palm against its cooled clay, you feel something. Not warmth exactly, but a memory of warmth. A pulse held in the dark crust. The seasoning is not a layer of grime. It is a diary written in fat, patience, and the rhythm of a hand that stirred the same way every dusk. The diary has no words. It has layers. Archaeologists extracting meal traces from 10,000-year-old Jomon clay pots found lipid residues that still carried the signature of wild boar and millet. The pots had not been washed. The seasoning held the meal. The same chemistry is at work here. The pot holds a recipe that was never written down. It holds the broth, the miso, the quiet weeping of the one who stirred it alone. There is a rhythm to this pot's crust. The layers are not uniform. Near the rim, a thin band of pale seasoning, almost translucent. That was the year the miso was made with late harvested soybeans. A trace of sweetness, trapped like amber. Below it a darker ring, thick and resinous. That was the winter of the long illness. The broth was thin, but the pot held warmth nonetheless. The grandmother who stirred it hummed through chapped lips. The pot remembers the scent of ginger and the soft weeping of the one who stirred. And if you felt that pulse yourself just now as the pot remembered the weeping, then you already know what kind of story this is. Subscribe so you do not miss what the seasoning reveals next. And tell me in the comments, what word rose in you when I described the winter of the long illness? The second layer tells of a wedding feast. The miso was rich, fermented for 3 winters. The pot held the celebration as steam rose and laughter filled the moonlit kitchen. The seasoning caught the ghost of cedar smoke from the hearth, and the faint perfume of sake spilled in toast. The third layer is the deepest, closest to the clay itself. It is almost black. That was the first pot of miso. The grandmother was young then, her hand unsure. The broth was simple but sincere. The pot remembers the first time it felt the weight of a ladle, the first time steam rose from its opening. It is not forgotten. The pot watched children grow. It watched them leave. It watched the grandmother grow old, her hand slower, her hum quieter. When she stopped stirring, the pot sat silent. No one reached for the ladle. The dust settled. The hearth went cold. But the pot waited. It knew something the children did not. The second question: would anyone remember the rhythm of her hand? An Abamino chef in Kyoto who has not washed his nabe in 40 years, insists the seasoning holds the soul of every broth ever cooked within it. Sensory chemistry research confirms that lipid polymerization creates a non-stick surface that deepens with use. But the chef says something else. He says the pot knows when the hand is uncertain. The pot knows when the broth is made with love. The seasoning is not just chemistry, it is memory. The same is true here. The pot's crust is not a residue left by neglect. It is an archive of intention. Every layer is a story. Every scratch is a meal. The pot remembers because the seasoning held. In Japan, the kazushi tradition treats seasoned cast iron as a living thing. The patina is proof of a vessel's history, not neglect. Published family recipe inheritance memoirs from Nagasaki describe pots passed down through generations without ever meeting detergent. The pots are not clean. They're held. Here in the Moonlit kitchen, the pot is the only recipe book the family has. The miso recipe was never written. It lives in the seasoning, the salt, the koji, the patience of 3 winters, the exact balance of sweetness and earth. It is all there, held in the dark crust, waiting for a hand to understand. The pot remembers a grandmother who hummed while she stirred. It remembers the scent of a secret ingredient added only once, a splash of sake on a cold night, a pinch of something wild from the forest edge. The pot remembers the exact moment she decided to add it. The seasoning caught that moment and held it. Stop. Listen. The pot has something to tell you. You and I both sense that this is not merely about a vessel. It is about a lineage of hands. And you are already part of it if you are still reading this. Subscribe to become one of the quiet souls who learns to read the crust. And in the comments, tell me, have you ever inherited an object that felt as though it knew you before you touched it? The third question, will you listen? A family heirloom is not the recipe itself. It is the object that holds the story of the recipe. The pot is the story. The seasoning is the text. The grandmother who stirred before you is waiting in the crust. If you have ever pressed your palm against an old wooden counter and felt it warm to your touch, you know the quiet ache of wanting to belong to something older than yourself. You know that objects hold memory, if only in the way they feel different under your hand than a new thing feels. The pot knows that ache. It has held it for years, waiting for a hand that would not reach for steel wool. The pot does not need soap. It needs someone who remembers what it holds. It needs a hand that stirs with intention, not haste. A hand that understands that the seasoning is the point. The crust is the archive. The pot is the recipe keeper. Tonight, in the moonlit kitchen, a hand reaches for the ladle for the first time in years. The pot feels the familiar weight of wood against its clay. The steam rises. The miso warms. The grandmother's rhythm returns, not as a memory, but as a presence. The hand stirs in the same pattern. The hum begins, soft at first, then sure. The pot holds the new meal on top of all the others. The seasoning accepts it into its layers. The story continues. The final question is not whether you will listen. It is whether you will become the next hand. Subscribe now so you do not miss the next relic that appears in the candlelight, waiting for someone to read its crust. And before you leave a word in the comments. The name of one object in your own home that you suspect holds more memory than you have asked it to share. The steam rose from the miso, and in its curl, the grandmother who stirred before you was present. The pot settled onto the cold hearth, its memories swelling with every leftover bubble. And if you ever find a pot that hasn't met the soapy sponge in 50 years, listen closely. It may have a story worth tasting.